In Roman history, one of the most well-known pieces of their culture was a bloodthirsty tradition known as the Gladiator Games. The first ever recorded gladiator fight was in 264 BC. The Gladiator Games traditionally started as a religious celebration, particularly honoring the dead for funerals, usually found in the wealthier classes. There would usually only be a few rounds of fights, and would use prisoners of war and slaves. It was an honorable gesture to host a gladiator fight for dead loved ones. Julius Caesar, for an example, honored his dead loved ones, particularly his father in 65 BC and his daughter in 49 BC. During the Pax Romana and the rise of the first Emperor Augustus, the Romans began to set up mock battlefields, arenas, and amphitheaters for their people's enjoyment. Some of the most famous ones include the one of Verona, Nimes, Pompeii, and of course the Colosseum in Rome. When the Colosseum stood at its tallest, it could seat around 50,000 people. At the height of the games, they were used as a source of entertainment for the common population. The games were a mixture of means of sacrifice, punishment under law, and reenactments of famous Roman battles and triumphs. The games during the Roman Republic were also a place where the aristocrats rose and competed against each other for the larger spectacle and more followers. However, with the start of the Roman Empire, there was a large transition in a more politically oriented control of the games, and the aristocrats did not have that much power anymore. It was not long before the emperors got very involved in the games. The emperors also used the games to make themselves look better towards the people by putting on large spectacles and giving them free stuff, temporarily satisfying their demands. During the intercessions between fights, they distributed food, including bread, into the crowd, since most of the crowd was extremely poor and were very hungry. They'd also throw out massilia, which would act as a voucher for later luxury items. He'd also usually appeal to the people on whether or not a gladiator would live or die, because he'd always have the final say. There has been much speculation over what the thumb meant, but in this case, it means to kill. There were many different types of gladiators during the gladiatorial games. First, there was the Vestari. The gladiator fought with the wild animals brought to the games. Many volunteered for this because it was not as dangerous as fights with other men, and usually the fights were fixed in favor of the gladiator. They were trained to fight animals from all over the conquered lands of Rome. For a type of loincloth with the decorative chest plate, and we use a spear, knife, or sometimes a whip to kill the beasts. Next were the eques, the gladiators who rode on horseback. They were equipped with a lance or a long sword, along with a helmet with a feathery crest or a chest plate with an arm guard. Next, there were the ondabatai. They were usually the criminals sentenced to death in the arena. They fought each other completely blind, because their helmets had no eye holes, and fought bare-chested. They also did not go to gladiator school, and were supposed to have no prior training. Next, there were the rhetari. They were the gladiators that had the items and clothing designed like a fisherman. He fought with no helmet or bodyguard to give him more mobility and agility, but he had a good-sized shoulder guard. He fought with a weighted net and the famous trident. His sworn rival and enemy was the Kutor, who wore a fist-crested helmet and fought with a sword and shield. There was also the Dimachari. This gladiator fought with two swords called sikai. The swords were short and curved, only about 18 inches long. He usually fought heavier and armored gladiators, like the Gallus. He fought with lighter armor, usually just with leather, leg, and arm protectors. Then there was Gallus. This gladiator was known for his heavy armor and less agility than the other gladiators. He would fight with a lance or a big sword, and his usual opponent would be Dimachari. Or an opponent of the same speed. most famous gladiators was Spartacus. As a slave, he was sent to gladiator school and was known as one of the best there. However, he led a slave revolt out, which would later scare the Romans. The gladiatorial shows can be easily compared to other civilizations. Similar to the predecessors, the Greeks with their Olympics, they had a taste for competition and an even bigger one for blood. However, the Romans can be compared more easily to a civilization across the Atlantic Ocean. They are known as the Mayans, who played this traditional ball game and had a religious aspect since they practiced human sacrifice following it. The shows in general can also be compared to our modern-day society, since we have many different sports and pastimes that most people enjoy to watch. Since there are also large rivals in our sports, they are similar to many different types of gladiators who fought back then. Overall, the Romans left a unique legacy unlike any civilization can and will be able to ever match.